da se prenese poruka za koju smatram da je jako bitna i važna. Znate, vrlo često, ja nikad u životu nisam govorio da sam koristio živu ilustraciju. Uvijek koristimo tekst. Nađemo ilustraciju, pročitamo i tako dalje. Međutim, današnja ilustracija koju bih želio da iskoristim ili priča koju želimo da čujemo, a mislim da je takve prirode da bi ne bi bilo fair prema toj priči da ju ja pričam. I pošto je osoba čija je to životna priča živa, ja sam odlučio da tu osobu pozovem da nam ona ispriča svoju priču. I današnja propovijed će u stvari sastojati od dva dela, od te priče i na kraju duhovne poruke koju želim da iznesemo. Ja bih želio, Olgica je već pozdravila, da pozdravim gospođu Gerdu Frajberg. Samo da kažem par reči o njoj. Ona je u Kanadu došla 1953. godine. Inače, potiče iz Epesalisije, to je tromeđa Poljske, Češke i Nemačke. Za vreme Drugog svjetskog rata provela je 2 godine u getu, 3 godine u koncentracionom logoru i 4 godine u kampu za raseljene. Jedno vreme bila je počasni predsjednik Kanadskog jevrejskog kongresa za Ontario. Nosilac je medalje zasluga od Governor General of Canada. I ako ste prolazili Bathursom i vidjeli Holocaust centar, Memorial centar, to je centar koji je ona osnovala i dizajnirala. Ali ono što je danas bitno, bitna je njena životna priča i poruka koju želim da mi izvučemo iz njene životne priče i da vidimo šta Hristos na kraju ima da nam kaže. Ja bih joj sada predao reč. Ako nekom treba prevod na naš, postoje aparati, možete uzeti aparate u hodniku i bit će simultani prevod. Hvala.
It's ready? No? Good. Everybody ready? Thank you. Thank you, and I appreciate being here today. And I actually didn't know that this is your holiday. But where do I start? Let me go 18 years ago. My grandson was 5 years old. You know, we Jewish people are celebrating Passover. And the first 2 nights, we have a family dinner where we recall the Exodus, when Jews left Egypt in a time of Pharaoh. So the first night, I was invited to my daughter-in-law's parents. The second night was in my home, and my grandson stayed overnight because he loved to be with me. In the morning, he wakes up, he's 5 years old, and he says, "Grandma, I want to ask you, how come that when we were in the first night in my mom's parents' house, there were so many people sitting at the table? And last night, nobody was here. It was my dad, my mom, your sister, my aunt. Why?" A 5-year-old child asked why. How do you answer that question? Why was it that a government would decide to murder their own citizens? Why was it that a government would destroy 6 million people and 1.5 million children? Why was it that the trains were going to Auschwitz always on time while the nation was at war? Why? We do not have the answer. For most of you do come from Europe, and maybe you relate to my story because the Balkans went through their own tragedy. So where do I begin? I was born in Upper Silesia. I had a wonderful childhood, just like my grandchildren do here, and my children had before them. My father was an athlete. He was racing motorcycles. We were going skiing. I started skiing when I was 7 years old. I haven't stopped yet. We were skating, we were visiting our relatives. The town where I come from was on the border between Germany and Poland. Our relatives all lived on this other side of the border because in 1922 there was a revolution, then it was a plebiscite, and the border was moved and we became Polish. We stayed on the Polish side and all our relatives were on the other side in Germany. But my mother was pregnant with her first baby. My father already had a business, and they decided to stay. And so we lived actually as Germans in Poland. So it seems that I'm always on the wrong side of the track. But we had a wonderful youth. And being on this other side of the border, I really wasn't too worried. When 1933 the Nazis came to power, and I just want to point out they didn't come to power by revolution. They were elected by the people of Germany. The next day when they came to power, the German people found themselves led by a dictator that they couldn't get rid of, that left them with the history that will be blemish on the nation forever. A cultural nation where Jewish people lived for 1,000 years and made a lot of contributions to the country. My grandfather was in a special unit of the Kaiser, the emperor, and was buried with military honors. My father served in the German army and was murdered by the same people that he fought for. So let me go back to my history. I went to high school at the age of 12 because in Poland you could write an exam, entrance exam. And I had a big dream, a dream that girls that age in those times didn't have. I wanted to study medicine. On September 1st, when the war started, in 1 hour the Nazis occupied our town and my dream was shattered. I was no longer allowed to go back to school because Jews were not allowed education. I had not one friend. We were the only Jewish family in town. I had not one Jewish friend. All my friends were Catholic. We were part of the community. The priest was our best friend. And I know more about the Catholic religion than I know about my own, because I always ran with the kids to church. But now I'm walking the streets alone and I cannot talk to my friends because they're not allowed to talk to me. And I ask why. On the 19th of October, they picked up my father and they took him away. For the young people here, I'd like to ask, how would you feel if they come tonight, the father that you love, that you go skiing with, that you go fishing, where you have wonderful times, is taken away suddenly. And as they took him away, he turned to me and said, "Take care of mother till I come back." I was 13 years old, no longer a child. But we at least were in our home. We had no business anymore. Everything was taken away from us. The money that we had in the bank was frozen. Jews were not allowed to withdraw any money from the bank. And we found ourselves in poverty without a breadwinner. But at least we had a roof over our head. That shouldn't last very long. By now they took away from Jews all the jewelry, all the silver. Jewish women were not allowed to wear a fur coat. It was taken away from them. But in March we were told to assemble at the police station with 20 kilo of our belongings. All of Upper Silesia was cleared of Jews. 20 kilo of your belonging from a home where my mother lived 18 years and raised her family. What do you take with you when you leave your home? Do you take the photos of your family? Do you take the tablecloth that the grandmother embroidered for your wedding? Or you're more practical and you take a blanket and some more warm clothes? I took my school books and the teddy bear because I was hoping the war will be over soon and I could continue with my studies. And so we went. We had no choice. We were loaded on trucks and middle of the night deposited somewhere, we didn't know where, in March. The climate's the same as in Toronto. And we were sitting in a town square, 35 families. The morning came and we saw in the houses that the curtains were parting, and we realized that these people couldn't come out at night. There was a curfew. The Jews could not come out of their houses after 6. And we now found out that we found ourselves in a ghetto in Jaworzno near Krakow. And so slowly the people came out, asked us who we are and why we are there. Now, by that time, they already cleared all the villages and towns of Jews surrounding the town. And as you probably know, that in Europe, people don't live in 4-bedroom homes like we live here. If you have a room and a kitchen, usually the grandparents lived with you. And the children all lived in the same room with their parents. 3 kids in 1 bed. I don't need to explain you the life in Europe. Most of you come from there. So now we come 30 more families, 35 families, and there is no place for us. Well, there was a Jewish school, which of course was closed by now, and they gave us each a room. And somebody brought us some spoons and forks, and somebody had an extra bed, and we set up our home. We had nothing. Food was rationed, and whatever you received was not really enough to survive. So by then I am 14 years old, and I have to care of my mother because my father asked me to. And so I would pick up all kind of jobs. I would be allowed to get out of the ghetto to work in the fields to harvest potatoes. And the farmer would give me potatoes, so I put it in storage, and we had enough potatoes to eat. And I would find, I was very handy. I was hanging lamps for people. I would fix heating pads. I would open them up. I would sew a bit. I would, people wear silk stockings, so when they had a run, I would pick up the run for 10 cents. And then we were selling part of our ration cards because we didn't have the money to buy our own ration, so we would sell some of it. But we were surviving. And we were hoping the war will be over soon. There were always rumors. And it wasn't so to be. By 1941, the war was the Germans fought a war with the Soviet Union. And so all the young men were taken to war, and they decided to take young people to replace them in the factories at work. So first they came and said 1 son from each family has to go. Now just imagine, you sit at dinner table, looking at your children, and you decide which one of your children you let go. Is it the oldest? But maybe he's not that strong. The middle one? You don't know if you ever see them again. But this decision had to be made, because if they wouldn't let the son go, they would not get food rations enough to share with the rest of the family. And so the one son went, and a few months later another son went. And when I took out all the young men from the ghetto, they started to take out the girls. My sister was at that time 18. She was caught in the street. She didn't come home till we found out that they rounded every girl that they could find on the street. And now it was just me and my mother. And there was a rumor in the town. It was Passover 1942 in April. Most of the winter I slept in a barn, slept out of the house, because I was afraid they picked me up and my mother would be alone. And it was the last night of Passover when a rumor was in town that they don't need anybody anymore, that they already filled their camps, And my mother asked me to stay and sleep indoors. Big mistake. They came in the night and they picked me up. Here is my mother standing at the door where they took away her husband, they took away the older daughter, and all she had me. And there is nothing she could do about it. The next morning when they marched us to the station to take us away, the mothers in desperation to get their children back would throw us little packages to the girls. When we came to a holding camp, we opened the packages. Some mothers gave them a bottle of muriatic acid with a note, pour it on your hands or feet, so when the doctor will see you, he'll realize that you are not able to work because you came with all these sores. My mother gave me a bottle, what we call today Tylenol aspirin. In Germany it was Togal, and gave me a note that I should take the whole bottle at once and maybe I faint and they will send me back. This is the first time I didn't obey my mother. I wanted to live, so I'll take my chances. Most of these girls are no longer with us. Yes, they didn't send them to the labor camp, but they did send them to Auschwitz, and they are gone. I am here. My friends are no longer with us. And so I found myself in a camp in Sudetenland, working in a spinning mill 7 days a week. We didn't know if it's Monday or Wednesday or Saturday. Every day was the same. Here I am, 16 years old. No mother, no sister, no freedom. I cannot make a decision whether I want to live or die. The decisions are made for me. We wake up in the morning, we line up for coffee and a piece of bread, which has to last the whole day. We go to work, we come back, we are counted, we go back to the barracks, and that is our life. These were the years of my teenage years. We could not survive on the food that we are receiving, but we survived on hope and faith. They took away from us everything that you can take away from a human being, but they could not take away our faith and our hope, because once you lost hope, you could not survive. It came our highest holiday, Yom Kippur, when we fast all day, and none of the girls in the camp lined up for food that day. This was our rebellion. We showed them, you took away everything for us. Our faith you cannot take. And the next day they wouldn't give us any food because they didn't think we needed. And for 3 years in a row we did the same. No matter what punishment, they would let us stand all night outside. Doesn't matter, we did it again. Speaking about hope, we didn't know what happened to our families back, because the only news we would get when a new transport arrived. When I came to the camp, there was only 90 girls there. By the time we got liberated, there were about 1,000. So when a new transport came, we would always hear what happened at home. I had a friend who came from Germany. She spoke only German, and so do I, because I speak both languages, Polish and German. And so I befriended her because she had no one else. She was an only child, and they were deported in 1938 from Germany to Poland. We were very close, and in the evening, before we went into the barrack to sleep, we would sit outside and just talk. We had dreams of what will become of us when the war will be over, and if maybe the Americans will come and get us out of there, and we will leave that country, that continent, and start a new life. These dreams kept us going, and we always hoped to see another sunrise and another sunset. We only were hoping to live one more day. And that night I sit with my friend, and she turns to me and says, I want you to promise me something. Promise me that if you survive, you'll tell the story. You tell the story of our suffering. You'll tell the world that is deaf and blind to our suffering right now. The world that doesn't care. Tell them. I said, Pepe, you are a year younger than I am, and you have the same chances of survival. So we will both tell the world one day. The next day we lined up to go to work, and as usually, they counted us. There was no way to escape. Where would we go? The way we looked in the dress, what we wore, we didn't know who is our friend and who is our enemy, who would help us and who would report us to the Nazis. There was no way to escape. We were envious of the birds that flew over our camp. They were free to fly in and out. We didn't have that freedom. When we stood there and they were counting, they found that one person is missing. They counted again and again till somebody said, that camp was on an escarpment and there was a river below because the factory did their own power for their engines. Somebody yelled, there is a body at the bottom of the river. And we went to the edge of the escarpment and there was my friend. A child that suddenly found herself alone in the world, had no longer the courage to face the next day. She lost hope. And that's the only decision that she could make and had the freedom to make. And I lost my friend, but I kept my promise. The day of liberation came. The night before we were lined up, the SS commander walked in front of the girls and looked at everyone, stopped at one and says, how old are you? She said, 17. Well, too bad, because you'll never get a day older. We rigged that camp with dynamite and we'll blow it up before we leave. Now, the war is almost over. The Allied planes flew over our camp in daylight. We knew the camp, the days are almost here that we could be liberated. Now we want to live. We go back to our rooms, to our barracks, and wait. Do we have an hour? 2 hours? Do we still be here in the morning? Morning came. The guards isn't screaming at us. The towers are empty. We don't see any dogs around the camp. And we're afraid to go out till we hear footsteps and we realize it is like an army marching. And it was the prisoners of war that were in a neighboring town from South Africa. They knew that about our camp. And they came to the gate and cut through the barbed wires and said, girls, you are free, the war is over. We are free to do what? To go where? And with whom? Children that grew old, no education, no family, no home, and no country that wanted us. What do we do tomorrow? How do we trust humanity again? In the evening, we heard some rumbling, and that's when the Russian tanks moved in. They liberated the town. We tore all the flowers from the garden in the factory and threw at them. And then an armored car was the last one that come through. And somebody with a lot of stars and medals jumped out and said, "Who are you?" And we told him who we are and said, "Where is your camp?" And he drove in the camp, and I'll never forget him standing on the roof of his armored car, and he said, "Girls," and he spoke in Yiddish because we didn't understand Russian, "Don't tell my soldiers where the camp is. I cannot guarantee you freedom, your safety. They've been at war now for 6 years. They rape every woman in sight." That was the first day of our freedom. We went back to their rooms and we were afraid to go out. We found out later that the reason that the camp wasn't blown up, there were Czech partisans lying on the roofs of the houses surrounding the camp and watching what was happening. And the Nazis didn't know that they cut through all the wires and they could never blow up the camp. And so here I am. I don't know who to say thank you, who risked the life to cut the wires to keep us alive. Unless, yes, we do have faith in humanity again. And so slowly we started moving out in groups. We felt the safety was in groups. And we came to our hometowns, only to find the towns empty. No Jewish children played on the playgrounds. Empty homes, empty streets. Where do we go? So rumors came that the Allied forces have set up camps for displaced persons because all of Europe was on the march. Everybody became a refugee. And so we went back to Germany and were taken into what we called the DP camps, or displaced persons camp. 2 years in a ghetto, 3 years in concentration camp, and 4 years in a displaced persons camp. 10 years of my life. Young people met each other and decided to get married. Nobody walked the bride down an aisle. No parents to guide them. And now they had to make a decision. Do we bring children into this world? And what if one day they asked us, "Why did you have me?" When again the world turns against the Jewish people. Or we don't have children and we give the Nazis and Hitler his posthumous victory. A tough decision to make. And so our children became victims as we were. Our children grew up without a grandparent, without a grandmother that would bring a toy or gift for a birthday or a holiday, without a grandfather that would take them fishing or to a ball game. They had no uncles or aunts or cousins, and they lived with our memories. Just a few years ago, my daughter said to me, "I never understood why I always heard screaming at night, and I went up to the door of your bedroom, and I didn't know what was happening inside. And now I know. It was your nightmares." But we had to survive. We had to build a new life. And it is hope that brought us to this point. It is hope that keeps you alive and keeps you going in the worst of times. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to your children. But most of all, when we look around at the world and what we experience and witness today, you almost lose hope in humanity. But we can't afford to lose hope. It is our obligation to remember history, to remember what people are can do to other human beings. We are responsible for each other. Look what happened to the German nation. If my son is out in the world and he'll say, my mother is a survivor, everybody will feel compassion for him because they know he lives with my memories. You can't help that. But if a German young person goes into the world and they detect a German accent, the first thought that will go through your mind, I wonder what his grandfather did during the war. They left a stain on that nation forever in history. And these young people are now left with making excuses maybe for their grandparents. In my book, they are not heirs of the father's sins. In my book, these are young people that have an obligation to make sure that we live as one people, as one human race, responsible for each other, that are able to give hope to those people that live in countries there is little hope for them. I just came back from Cuba last week, and I must tell you, I have sleepless nights. These people are so indoctrinated, they don't even know that there is another world out there. We went on a mission of mercy. And whatever we brought for these people, I was embarrassed how grateful they were to us. But this is what I do. When I survived, I had a mission. 6 million died. I am not any better than they were, not more educated. But I survived with my life had to be turned into a reason I had to use every day that I have to remind, to teach, and to remember. When they took the people walking into the gas chambers and they turned back and saw the people behind them, they cried out, "Remember us." And that's what I've been doing since I was liberated. I'd like you to remember them and all the victims of inhumanity to men. Thank you.
Nadam se da me sad razumete zašto sam smatrao da je ovo priča koju ne trebam ja da pričam. Ali zašto sam htio da čujem ovu priču danas? Zašto je ona važna za nas koji se smatramo hrišćanima danas? Znate, mi živimo u ovom svetu za koji se ponekad pitamo kakav je i šta je. Možda nas nekad snađu okolnosti na koje nemamo odgovora. I čovjek se pita kako dalje. Jedino što čovjeka može da nosi dalje, možda kada je sve otišlo, jesu nada i vera u Boga. Kada umre nada, kada umre vera, iako smo živi, mi smo umrli sa njima. Ne znam da li ste zapazili neke detalje. Ona još nije spomenula pilote koji su leteli, žrtvovali svoje živote da bi im samo bacili plakat na kojem je pisalo da oslobođenje dolazi. Ja držim plakat u mojoj ruci. Neko je za mene i vas se žrtvovao. Bog se žrtvovao. Oni su slobodni. Mi smo danas slobodni. Zato što je neko platio cenu. Zato što se neko žrtvovao. Zašto je ovo sve bitno? Znate, današnja subota ja sam zamoljen da govorim o misionstvu. Zamoljen sam da govorim o propovedanju evanđelja. Ali zašto ova priča i zašto govorimo o svemu ovom? Kada sam prvi put čuo za priču gospođe Frajberg, zapitao sam se šta je